welcome to Digital Shift, also known as Corporate Evolution Tales. Join us as we dive into the dynamic world of digital transformation. From illuminating case studies to captivating narratives, we uncover the stories behind companies' journeys toward digital excellence. Whether you are a seasoned corporate leader or an aspiring innovator, our podcast explores the shifts, challenges of modern business evolution. Hello everyone, this is another episode of Digital Shift, aka Corporate Evolution Tales, and today my guest is Noah Healy. Thank you so much, Noah, for being with me today, and how are you?
I'm doing okay, Mariam. Thanks for having me here.
Awesome. Okay, would you like to introduce yourself before we will dive into digital transformation?
Well, you said my name, Noah Healy. I'm a algorithmic specialist, and I'm working on some patent pending technology to digitally transform how commodity markets work. I've also worked for several different startups over my career doing automation work for the most part.
Amazing. I think digital transformation and automation, they're kind of a synonyms for me, at least. But okay, let's start from your opinion about digital transformation. So, what do you think it is for you?
To me, it's fundamentally about utilizing computational technology. So
Mm-hmm.
I would say that computational technology is the third serious innovation in all of human history, in addition to agriculture and the steam engine.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that the societies that exist today currently don't really exploit computers at all.
Yeah.
And we will either build societies that can exploit them, or we will have the institutions that presently exist get ripped apart, uh,
Mm-hmm.
mostly through overcapacity.
Interesting. And well, I think when we are speaking about digital transformation and what you just mentioned, there probably can be some stages, right? So even if like how humanity is ready for this and generally. So do you think there are some stages that we can highlight when we are speaking about digital transformation?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so stage one, and definitely the easiest one, is direct automation,
Mm-hmm.
the transfer of human activities to machine activities. And we see this again in the industrial shift. The earliest uses of steam engines and other types of, mechanically assisted machine work is
Mm-hmm.
things like trip hammers or running pumps, where you would have a physical machine that human beings used to, you know, move back and
Use
forth,
themselves.
and then
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
get an engine that moves back and forth exactly like that instead of using a
Mm-hmm.
human being. But fairly rapidly, once you have that capacity, you start coming up with new ways to exploit. So at the second
Right.
phase, you see things in the industrial age like the locomotive, where
Mm-hmm.
by building entirely new infrastructure, i.e. railroads, you can now have an entirely
Yeah.
new form of transportation. I think we've seen a little bit of that in sort of the phase three. Sort of social media is a completely new animal.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
again, that involves a new infrastructure. And that, I'd say, isn't nearly as successful or valuable as the railroads were. And
Yeah.
but we're still seeing that evolve.
Right, agree. And you mentioned the one of the examples that you mentioned about the technical part that is replacing human being, right? So I think a lot of people have fear of digital transformation, even if it is like on the software or hardware or anywhere. They have this fear of being replaced. So what do you think can support to have less of that fear, or at least don't have it at all? Is there anything specific you will suggest us to do when we are doing digital transformation to escape that fear of from people?
That's a very difficult one. And again,
Hmm.
We see this historically around industrialization. We see it mythically around agriculture. The
Yeah.
story of Cain and Abel. Cain does not like his agriculturalist brother very much,
Yeah.
and looking through archaeological evidence of prehistory, that seems to be the general consensus of the people that we aren't descended
Hmm.
from. I think that gives us a sort of pointer or direction to head in, of
Hmm.
building a set of values and ethics that are joinable.
Yeah.
So that's where sort of my work with marketplaces comes in, and this
Hmm.
kind of computational ethical thinking, how to bring computers into a system in ways that make the people in that system uh,
Mm-hmm.
better off, and in
Yeah.
ways that make them better off in ways that they care about being better off. And under those circumstances, maybe you didn't like writing a daily summary email or
Yeah.
something that can be done for you,
Mm-hmm.
or perhaps it was really always a pain to run
Yeah.
through the 5,000 item checklist when 4,000 of those items can all be ticked off automatically.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are the kinds of things, but that's where things become social, political, and so on. And that engagement
Mm-hmm.
needs to happen on that level. You need to understand that these are technical and social issues and require technical and social inputs. Just
Yeah.
getting the politics right and getting the technology wrong is, in many cases, more disastrous than getting the technology right and the politics wrong, because if the technology's right, sort of reality can catch up. But if the politics is wrong, you're just going to keep doing bad things.
Yeah, agreed. I think when you mentioned about politics, comparing it to, for example, to big companies, it's a lot of leadership that is kind of similar to politics and like people that are leading generally the change in the company. And it's so important to have that understanding of where you are going and what kind of goal you have when you are doing the change. So would you agree that the beginning is the most important thing for digital transformation and how you are understanding the goal of your change?
I don't really think so. That
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important to begin. If
Yeah.
you don't, then you're not on the path. But the thing about what computer technology is, computers are these self-referential or recursive machines. They can sort of feed back into themselves and turn into their
Mm-hmm.
own cycle. And they do that really, really, really quickly, right? So if you have any kind of instability in a system
Mm-hmm.
that is spinning a billion times a second, that's going to get magnified. That's going to become sort of very apparent. That instability is going to become very bad.
Mm-hmm.
And so while we as humans can live with things that, maybe are going to blow up in our grandchildren's face and we're not going to notice because we'll be dead by then. Or maybe they'll blow up in our great great grandchildren's face. And once again,
Mm-hmm.
that's somebody else's problem. If we have a system that's cycling 10 times faster, then a problem that won't show up for 200 years is going to show up in 20 years. If it's cycling 100
Yeah.
times faster, it's going to show up in 2 years. If it's cycling,
Right.
a billion times faster, it's going to show up in a couple thirds of a second. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the difficulty. The more you are capable of bringing computers on board, the more you're capable of integrating that technology into your system, the more
Mm-hmm.
stable morally and ethically that system is going to have to be, because the
Yeah.
more that computer cycle is going to start getting averaged into our
Mm-hmm.
human rhythms. And, it gets fast enough and it just blows up in your face.
Yeah, agreed, definitely. And you mentioned about the cycle. So comparing it with or like renaming it to the process, do you think there are specific ways how you can identify what can be improved or digitalized in the process or in the cycle, as you mentioned?
Well, that's where things get really, really fun, because computational
Mm-hmm.
mathematics is the mathematization of imagination. So it's literally impossible for anything not to be able to be digitally transformed. It's
Mm-hmm.
simply a challenge to us to, do we actually understand this thing? And
Yeah.
the answer, embarrassingly enough, turns out to mostly be no. We mostly don't understand what it is that we're doing. Um, but we have the chance to learn, and that gives us a lot of open opportunity. And so, you know, embrace learning.
Yeah. And when you are, well, when we speak about learning, I think one good hint for everyone is to understand how they can be on the top of everything, or like at least 70% on the top of everything that is going on around the world, right? Specifically in spheres like yours, I think it's developing very fast. And is there any hint or suggestion that you can give to our audience how they can keep with the updates that there are right now?
I don't have a solution to that one myself. That's one of those issues that we're facing as societies. Our
Mm-hmm.
societies are falling apart because the existing expertise systems are not up to that task. For me, I would say going back to the fundamentals, while there's an enormous amount of noise and that noise is expanding very rapidly,
Yeah.
there aren't as many major changes in human understanding as the
Mm-hmm.
salespeople would like you to believe there are. And so you can take the path forward. Computer technology is very young. Virtually every important paper and person in that field is online, and quite a few of them are even still alive, although the founders are at this point dead, and most
Mm-hmm.
of those kind of second generation is dying pretty rapidly now. But still, the work in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and technically before then as well comprises more than 99% of how modern computers, modern programming systems operate.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a much smaller group of stationary targets to go after than just
Yeah.
trying to read 100% of all the blog posts that got published in the last 30 seconds. So I'd start there and develop your mental map and mental model of what's going on,
Mm-hmm.
and just proceed from that kind of system. And again, be the change you want to see in the world. Once you actually understand the fundamentals, you'll
Mm-hmm.
find that a lot of these sort of first steps and so on are going to be quite obvious because many of them were actually done decades before you were born, and so you can just
Mm-hmm.
copy paste, and then you can start filtering out the marketing hype and
Yeah.
finding some sources that are a lot more credible.
Mm-hmm. Agree. And when we are speaking about digital transformation and general digitalizing, I think there are very common challenges that people are coming across. So, do you have any specific challenges that you can mention from your sphere that are common, and you know some solutions for them?
Well, in what I'm currently dealing with, so I just got an update on my lawsuit against the federal government. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
as I'd mentioned, I'm attempting to patent a market mechanism that is going poorly, largely due to a complete failure of knowledge of these fundamental principles that I'm talking about
Mm-hmm.
within the patent office, and that's a huge challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Even in companies, it's very common to say, okay, I, as an executive, want such and such to happen. I don't care how it happens. Well,
Yeah, very
you
common.
have to, right? You actually have to care how it
Mm-hmm.
happens,
Yeah.
particularly once you're operating at web scale and with computers. If your computers are doing something wrong, then suddenly your company might be committing fraud. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and and again, with that, billion times a second, if suddenly you're responsible for committing billions of instances of fraud, that's very bad for you. Um,
Yeah.
so so my sort of prime challenge is dealing with that sort of lack of knowledge, lack of education, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to solve that problem kind of in general. You got to do it one at a time, person as you find, one to one,
Yeah.
and present it. And that's the fight, that's the struggle. But
Mm-hmm.
on the other side of that is automated systems.
Yeah.
Another kind of semi-relevant. I've got a water system that works in my town, which is great. The capital city
Mm-hmm.
of my state, actually, we just had a minor winter storm. I'm sure it would be a joke to somebody living in Central Asia, but for us, a few inches of snow is a big deal. It turns out that it was
Yeah.
actually a very big deal in the capital city, which is about 70 miles east of here.
Mm-hmm.
Their water treatment system had suffered a cascading power failure, and their
Oh,
water
okay.
system's been offline for 2 days because
Hmm.
of a couple inches of snow, and that's
Yeah,
that's pretty bad. Um,
that's sad.
yeah, the mayor apparently spent last night in the water treatment plant. I don't know
Oh
what he
well.
was doing there, but if you're a CEO and you're running these automation things, if you don't want to spend some weekend in a programmer's cubicle watching
Yeah.
people type on computers, you need
Hmm.
to care. You need to understand.
Agree, definitely. So when you mentioned a lot of technology, and we spoke about some that there are coming back to that. Do you think, or like, do you know, are there any emerging technologies or trends that you particularly are excited about for digital transformation in your sphere?
Well, so AI is of course a big thing. I am not that impressed by generative AI.
Hmm.
However, the technology that underlies generative AI is also being used in another form called reinforcement learning. And those are incredibly impressive systems.
Hmm.
The most famous of them are things like AlphaGo or Alpha Chess, Alpha C0, where systems were developed to independently learn how to play games like chess, poker, Go,
Hmm.
even Stratego at human or so beyond superhuman levels that it's just not really even, we're not on the same scale anymore. Those systems have also been deployed in other areas to do things like figure out how to do protein folding, figure out
Hmm.
much more efficient ways to simulate fluid dynamics. Fairly recently, I believe the Bio Nobel was given to the people that figured out how to do protein unfolding, which means that we potentially now live in the era, and it's looking pretty real, of fully synthetic biology. um,
Hmm.
those kinds of powers are
Yeah.
insane, and that kind of approach and system has the potential to completely disrupt entire classes of professional action.
Hmm.
Um, you know, we could see the end of doctors, lawyers, politicians, marketers, CEOs. Like it gets really crazy really fast once you start thinking about these questions. And so for people that are presently, in the position of enjoying leading
Hmm.
positions in societies, working out what society can look like in ways that make people better off. There's a lot of ceiling there. There's a lot of
Yeah.
room, uh, and it's very public that that room is there. We just haven't moved
Hmm.
in yet.
Yeah. Agree. And I think this will be my last question, and it's more about the advice. So, what advice would you offer to other people or like our audience to take into account when they want to start their digital transformation?
Well, again, start with the people, and with the people, because
Hmm.
they're who's going to care, and they're who's going to matter. Almost no matter what it is that you want to do, there is a way. Maybe nobody will be intelligent enough to actually solve whatever that math problem turns out to be, but
Hmm.
using things like computational mathematics and game theory, I've found a mechanism to link these human desires to a math problem that if you solve it, you get a computer
Hmm.
program out. And so that exists. That's just how reality, around us is. Uh,
Hmm.
and so start with the stuff that matters, finish with the stuff that matters, and work out what the structure of what needs to go in the middle is from that.
Yeah.
And test it against that, because if we design just like, well, again, just like the industrial era, we've designed our
Hmm.
machines to work for us to do what we want. A car, that's not the most efficient way to make a physical object move, under its own power, like rocket engines are.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so if that's all we cared about, if we just cared about the machine's ability to go,
Yeah.
over at Bonneville Salt Flats, they've gotten people to drive faster than the speed of sound. But
Hmm.
we can't live like that. Like, we need to be able to drive and steer.
Yeah.
um,
Right.
so, so that's got to be the core and the key, and that's where the value
Hmm.
proposition's got to come from.
Awesome. Okay, I think that was everything from my side. Anything else now you would like to add before we'll wrap up this episode?
No, no, I'm good. That was an interesting set of questions, a good conversation.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for joining my podcast and have a great day.
Thank you. Bye bye.